And two Russia experts, former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and from Kyiv, former Director for European Affairs for the U.S. National Security Council, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. Welcome both. I can't think of two experts I would rather be speaking with right now at this time in history. Ambassador McFaul, you say that Putin might soon be remembered as Putin the Weak, but he controls the air, huge air power. We still haven't gotten those F-16s there. And at the same time, you know, they're dug in. They're mining that whole area where the counteroffensive is taking place. And there's been slow going. It's been a slog. A lot of casualties on both sides.
Yeah, well, my piece is about his hold on power inside Russia. Okay. And I go through various things to show why this has weakened him. But Andre, you're asking exactly the most, in my opinion, the most important question. Does the appearance and the action, the facts of weakness back home undermine the morale of Russian soldiers occupying Ukrainian territory right now? To me, that's the crucial issue. And of course, we don't know that. We don't have public opinion polls of those soldiers. But if I were one of those soldiers and I was watching the chaos back home, I was watching how my commanders said we were going to be tough against these defectors, against these mutineers, and then did a deal with them, and then bought them out and let them go to Belarus for nothing, I would begin to wonder, why am I fighting here? But they don't have to listen to me. They have to listen to Prigozhin. That's exactly what Prigozhin was saying to them just a few days ago. And I wonder, will that message carry there? And I think that would be a crucial blow to their efforts inside Ukraine.
Well, Alexander, you're there in Kyiv. How are Ukrainians viewing these cracks in Putin's power? Do they see an opportunity now because no matter what happens, the Russian military is somewhat in disarray?
I think the events of the last several days are a head scratcher everywhere, including in Ukraine. But what seems to translate is that Putin is weaker today than he was this time a week ago. That Putin is less sure than he was a week ago, and I think that is by the wheels that he put in motion himself. He started this war that is disastrous for him, for his regime, for his legacy. But he thought that he had time on his hands. He thought that he could just play for another year, maybe through our next election cycle. He had time on his hands. I think what he's coming to the realization about, and you could see that in his multiple statements, a lot of them at odds with each other, is that time doesn't seem to be on his hands. He put in motion forces that he can't control. This long operating private military company was a threat to other regimes. It was a threat to order around the world. Now it's a threat to him, and he doesn't know next time that some of this war is going to spill over into his own corner again. For the picture inside Ukraine, what's fascinating is that this is going to have an impact on the morale of the troops and their ability to fight. But it also should have an impact on the U.S. government. There is no simple solution to this war. There is no minimum amount of equipment that's going to be enough to help Ukraine win, but not push Russia over the edge. Right now, the urgency should be to help Ukraine win, provide Ukraine with all the equipment that it needs, because there is no easy solution. There are only hard solutions here forward. That's what we should have learned from this experience.
And Ambassador McFaul, we've got a NATO summit in 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks from today. And President Zelensky is not going to get what he wants in terms of rapid accession to NATO. Has already said that he's not sure he's going to go because of that. He doesn't have the F-16s. The training is still taking place. The decision has been made, but they have not been rapid enough with all of the, with every stage of how they've ramped up these weapons. And now is the time when they need them.
Well, I think so. Andre, you and I have talked about that for a year and a half now. But I think there could be another lesson from this fiasco in Russia, which is all the things you just listed, right? NATO membership, F-16s. I could add to the list ATACMS, the long-range rocket systems, other weapon systems. The administration and other NATO allies have been reluctant to do those things because they constantly worry about escalation from Putin. We can't do that. He's going to escalate. We can't do that. He's going to escalate. We got to give him an off-ramp, which sometimes translates as Ukrainian territory, because otherwise he'll fight no matter what. But look at what we just learned over this weekend. He was challenged internally with a mutiny against his armed forces. This, this jujitsu we're trying to do, this was all against Gerasimov and Shoigu, but not Putin. Let's face it, those were his folks. He then got up and made a very tough speech, just like the old Putin, but then he capitulated. He didn't escalate. He didn't double down. He didn't use the nuclear option metaphorically. He negotiated. And I think that is a very important lesson for all of us to think about. The notion that there's only one way out, to be careful, it might be the opposite. Helping Ukraine go on the offensive might actually cause Putin to begin to negotiate.
And on that point, Alexander, Colonel Vindman, what do you sense is Zelensky's appetite for any negotiations, given Putin's reluctance to take negotiations seriously? There's a lot of European pressure, I don't need to tell you, to actually begin negotiating, and he's beginning to lose support among Republicans back home here.
I think that's domestic politics in the U.S. There's a far right that's captured by Donald Trump and is catering to Donald Trump. But support, from my sense, is still pretty much ironclad also in Europe. And I think this constantly there's an effort for kind of the appeasement faction to raise this idea of negotiation. It gets beaten down pretty quickly. I'm sure we'll see articles over the coming days that say the risks are too high. Ukraine needs to be pressured to capitulate. That is not going to happen. There is no appetite for any negotiation now, especially that the Ukrainians smell victory in the near future. What we need to do is, as Ambassador McFaul said, is provide maximum support. There is no middle ground where we just do enough for Ukraine. All we're doing is extending the war. We're not easing the burden on Russia, the enormous turmoil that is going to unfold in Russia when Russia loses this war. That's already foregone conclusion. That was written in the cards as soon as the Russians started this campaign in February 2024. Now the question is, can we end this war sooner, without additional risk, without nuclear disasters, without some sort of erratic faction taking control in Russia? And the way we do that is by giving Ukraine all of the resources that they need.